G'day and welcome back. I'm Nelly and this is Undescripted. And let me tell you, starting a booktube channel and a master's degree at the same time was bad planning on my behalf, not ideal. I originally filmed this video doing a January-February haul, and I filmed it and it just sat unedited for a long time. I just didn't have time to do it. I had assignments to do, etc, etc. So this is now a quarterly haul and I have 29 books to show you that I got over the January, February, March period, and I have 3 book unhauls that I did in this time period as well, which will be at the end of the video. We'll start with my January book haul, which is this pile. I hauled 9 books in January and I spent an average of $5.78 per book. Ideally, that dollar value per book average is less than 5, just so I'm not spending all of my husband's money, but it's fine. The first book is The Great Railway Bazaar, and it's all about trains and traveling on trains. It's a classic. I never heard of this book before I saw it in the op shop, but I love traveling by train. Like, I would much prefer to travel by train between Sydney and Melbourne than fly. And it's just like a road trip book, but it's about traveling on trains throughout, I believe, Asia. So I'm just going to love reading this book. Never heard of this author before, never heard of this book, but I'm excited to eventually get around to this, hopefully while reading it on a train. Next book is a steal, and it is Blankets by Craig Thompson. This is a very chunky black and white graphic novel that I found also in an op shop. You never find these books in an op shop. How much did I pay for it? I paid $8 for this. This would have cost me at least, I'm gonna say $35. When I bought it, the lady said as well she'd only put it out that morning, so I was quite lucky to stumble upon this. I have not yet read it, but I will. It's currently my only unread comic book that I have. I don't know much about what it's about. I know it's a standalone contemporary, probably about this couple and their romance. That's what I'm assuming from the picture. It doesn't have a blurb on the back, it just has reviews, but I love graphic novels like this. I don't need the superhero comic books, I just love graphic novels like this. Next is a bit of a nerdy book, and that is 17 Equations That Changed the World by Ian Stewart. I found this in a little library near my house just because I love maths and I know a few of these equations, but I don't know all of them. When I'm in a nerdy mood and I want to fill my life with some more maths, I will turn to this one. So it should be, I was about to say a quick read, but now that I'm looking at it, there's a lot of text on these pages with very small borders. So maybe it won't be a quick read, but it will definitely be a fun read. Then the next 6 books are the first 6 volumes in the Saga series, which I picked up as a bundle secondhand off Facebook Marketplace. I had already had the first one, which is why I unhauled it in a previous video, but I didn't have the next 5. And it was $40 for 6. One is usually, I think, $30. So this was an absolute steal. So the first 6 volumes, I'll quickly run through the covers because we all love a bit of beautiful art in our booktube content. I've already read all of these as well. I read them all in January when I picked them up, and I'm not in a real hurry to buy any more unless I find them cheaply as well, but my library has them as ebooks on their app, so when I want to continue this I will have the ebook versions. So that's all my books that I hauled in January. Moving on to February, we have 13 books. So my average was $5.12, the first one. And this is Poetics of Space, Volume 3. I have Volume 2 already on my shelves. This is a non-fiction about the politics of public space in Australia, and then usually more locally in Melbourne as well. And I love how hyper-local all these little lectures are, because when I read books about urban issues and architecture. It's usually set in America or in the UK. So to find something this local on a topic that I love reading about, like everything is so interesting. And it's just got, let me find an example. So it has, I don't know, 6 different lectures written out with pictures, but this one here that I'm showing you is by Kate Shaw, and it's on the Carlton Public Housing Estate. I've already read all these and I all thought they were really thought-provoking, and it just talks about the issues surrounding public housing, new public housing, the governance of public housing, and it has pictures. Here is some public housing getting demolished, which is sad. It's just a fun little indie print of a book, and it's great. If you if you're interested in these issues in Australia, I highly recommend these. I think they're all free to read on the website. I will find the website and link it below if you're interested. Next, me and my husband went away for our anniversary, and of course I hit up all the little cute shops in Daylesford, which is where we went, and one of them that I picked up was this little book of German poetry. I am very poorly teaching myself German. I actually want to take formal classes when I have time, and I have a lot of books in German at the moment, but no poetry. This is by Julie Schrader, and try not to judge my German too much, but it's Wenn ich lieber sie externe, which I believe is translated to, let me try, when I love you, I see stars. So I'm assuming it's lots of love poetry, but this is just such a cute little old edition of poetry. I love how vintage it looks, but that's just a little book of German poetry. Next we have The Poetics of Space by Gaston Blanchard. I have not read this one yet. I could not exactly tell you what it's about, but I'm hoping it's a mixture of psychology and architecture or spatial design. So it's another one of these books on urban and architecture issues. I just can't seem to buy enough of them. I've read most of the collection of books on this issue that I have. This is just another one, and when I read it, you will hear my thoughts on it. I found this book in the Mill Markets in Daylesford, which is a vintage antiques market. They sell all sorts of things. It's huge. I found this book, which is Back to Billabong by Mary Grant Bruce, and I'm collecting this classic Australian children's series in this edition, and they usually buy them for around $40, which is steep. But I found this one for $16, which is an absolute steal, and it wasn't one I already had. So this is just a very cute classic series about some siblings who live on a farm in Australia and their adventures. I like to think of it as the Famous Five of Australia, and I've only read the first one, but it is a work in progress. I now have all but one of this series. Next is The Curious Case of Benjamin Button by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I've only read The Great Gatsby by him, and I'm really interested in this concept of a man aging backwards. I have, I think, seen parts of the film, but I don't really remember, but I'm really interested to see how it's executed in book form or in written form, and just how F. Scott Fitzgerald works his magic with his wonderful way with words. So I'm really interested to see how this goes. It's a nice short classic as well, so hopefully I'll get around it just sooner rather than later, but I will probably say that about all my books. Next is Three Women by Lisa Taddeo. I have seen this book making its rounds in BookTube, I don't know, a while ago, but I saw it in an up shop, and I don't have a very extensive thriller section. I'm saying this now, but I'm not even sure why I think it's a thriller. Well, I'm not actually sure now. I picked it up thinking it was a thriller, but it might just be contemporary. I'm not sure. But my thriller collection isn't very extensive because I don't usually enjoy thrillers. So if I find one that I think might be good, I'll pick it up at an op shop. And if I don't like it, it can be donated without much fuss. I just have a high rotation of thrillers in my bookshelf. They very rarely stay very long on my shelves. So this is for when I'm in a thriller mood, if it's a thriller. If it's a thriller. Next, I have Shantaram by Gregory David Roberts. This is apparently an Australian masterpiece, according to this review at the top from The Age. It is a chunker. It has how many pages? 933 pages. This is based off the author's life, though it is not non-fiction. So it's about a person who escapes prison and then he's on the run from authorities throughout the world. I believe it's been turned into a mini-series, so of course I want to read the book before I dive into that. And sometimes I'm just really in the mood for a really long book. Like, you're just really in the mood to invest yourself and just slog it out. I don't know if that's me. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes I just want to pick up a book and be completely engrossed in it for the longest period of time possible. And I think this might be one. I'm really looking forward to when I'm in a chunky book kind of mood so I can pick this one up. Opposite of chunky, we now have The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway, which is a teeny tiny little classic. I've never read any Ernest Hemingway, and I'm really excited to dive into a little one to start off with, but also the fact that it circles around the sea. I love books about the sea, especially if they have the sea in the title. I don't know, is this like a book fetish of mine where if I see the sea in a book title, I have to pick it up and at least know what it's about. Don't know anything about this. I'm just super keen for little classics. Then out of left field, I have The Trouble with Being Born by E.M. Cioran. And this is not something I would usually read. It is a philosophy book, and I've never read a philosophy book before. So when I saw it in a little library, I thought, this is a fail-safe way. Is that a thing? I don't know. It's a fail-safe way of trying philosophy, especially it being a classic or a modern classic. So hopefully there is some merit behind this book and why it has been deemed a modern classic. This one explores the idea, if I sum up this blurb for you, that disaster lies not in the prospect of our deaths, but in the fact of our birth that is a laughable accident. So we'll see how it goes. Next is Stargirl by Jerry Spinelli. I read this as an audiobook from the library, but when I saw it again in an op shop, I wanted to add it to my physical collection because I really enjoyed the story for a young adult book, and that kind of like Luna Lovegood, Leslie, oh my gosh, I can't remember her last name, Leslie Burke from British Terabithia, and Stargirl from this book. I love characters like that. I love those kind of exaggerated, I am who I am, I don't care what people think characters, especially if they're girls, because that appeals to my inner child of when I loved reading British Terabithia and watching Luna Lovegood on screen. So I just wanted to add this to my collection of those type of books because it makes me, what's the word? Not melancholy. Makes me reminisce. I'm not sure what word I'm looking for, but I hope you get my drift here. So it's a book I've already read, but now it's on my physical shelf as well. Next up for February, we have The Allegory of Law by Brandon Sanderson. I have read his Mistborn trilogy, and I really enjoyed those for someone who doesn't read much fantasy, but again, he has a great reputation on BookTube, so I don't think I went wrong trying Brandon Sanderson. But this is the next book in the next trilogy following the Mistborn series that's set in the same world, but I believe this is in a Western setting. So I'm really interested to continue with Brandon Sanderson, continue with the story of the Mistborn trilogy, and just see where he takes it in different setting with the same sort of magical powers. So it's relatively short compared to the other books in the trilogy. So I picked it up and now it's on my shelf for when I'm in a fantasy mood again, which doesn't happen very often, but it's good to have these for when it does happen because you don't want to miss those opportunities. They only come around every so often. Next is The Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling. I've never read The Jungle Book. I've also never watched the Disney adaptation of one of the stories in here because I believe these are a collection of short stories as opposed to one long novel. But this is to be added to my classic children's collection and it's quite a pretty copy for an op shop find. So one day I'll get around to reading this and finding out what it's all about. I had a good friend recommend The Jungle Book, like the book to me because he really enjoyed it. So one of these days I'll read it and I'll let him know what I think and we can bond over, hopefully, a mutual love for The Jungle Book. So I'm really excited to explore this one. And last for February is Smashing Physics by John Butterworth. Which is another find from an op shop. You should just assume that every book I have is from an op shop. But you don't often see books like this in op shops. And this is about the Higgs boson. And I don't know much about Higgs boson. I've never read a book specifically dedicated to the Higgs boson. I can't even sum up the Higgs boson for you at the moment, but hopefully after I read this book, I will be able to do that for you. Again, I don't have too many unread physics books on my shelf, so it's always good to keep myself well stocked because I actually enjoy reading these more often than not, especially more often than the other books you've seen sprinkled in this haul. And that's it for February. Moving on to March, I picked up 7 books. My average was $4.26, which is pretty good. The first book, Bill Bryson's Down Under. I've never read a Bill Bryson book, and I'm really interested to see A, what he's like, but B, how a non-Australian views Australia. And I'm not really sure what angle he takes in this book, or, you know, what he chooses to discuss, or even what its purpose really is. Like, is it like, come to Australia, it's great, I had a great time, or is it, here's a whole lot of facts about Australia? Like, I've never read any Bill Bryson, but I'm really interested to see what he has to say, if I like what he has to say, and if I like it enough to keep it on my shelf, because I'm a bit hesitant at the moment. So we'll see how we go when I get around to reading it. Next is The Unseen World by Liz Moore, which made its round on BookTube a while ago as well. And I got, who was it? Oh, the Peruse Project. Really loved this book. I really hope this one's a thriller. Again, I picked it up because I remember at the time really liking what Peruse Project had to say about the book, and she spoke really highly about it. Maybe it's a mystery more than a thriller. Again, going in blind. I like going in blind to my thrillers, which doesn't really work when what I think is a thriller turns out not to be a thriller. But this, I'm glad to have on my shelves. I'm really keen to see why Peruse Project liked it so much. I've really moved away from Peruse Project. We have very different tastes in books. So this must have been from years ago when she really liked this book, and it's just stuck with me that I need to keep an eye out for it. Next, I have a 3 for 2 on a gift card, which is even better, so I didn't spend a dime on the next 3 books. And the first one is by Rachel Yoder. I think I saw someone on YouTube talk about this book. Was it Savage Reads? It might have been Savage Reads. So I saw it in the bookshop and I was like, that looks familiar, and I read the back and it sounded really interesting. I really hope it has some sort of magical realism element to it, but I'll find out when I read it. So it says on the back, at home full-time with her 2-year-old son, an artist finds she is struggling. She is lonely and exhausted. Her husband, always traveling for work, calls her from a faraway hotel room One more till her bedtime and she fears she might lose her mind. Instead, she starts gaining things, surprising things that happen one night when her child will not sleep. New appetites, new instincts from deep within herself, a new voice. Has lots of great reviews on the back as well. So I'm really excited to have this funky little book, which I'm hoping is like a fun, exotic, out of left field as well book, just to mix up what I'm usually reading. So hopefully it'll be a nice spicy twist in my reading slog when I pick it up. Next one is a Russian classic. It is Life and Fate by me and names. We never go well together. By Vasily Grossman. It's in a beautiful edition. It's not quite regular book size either, but super floppy, and I love it. I love how chunky it is as well. I don't know what this is about. I just know it's a Russian classic and I want to read more of those, and it was on the sale table at Readings and I picked it up because it was beautiful and it matches the Anna Karenina version that I have as well. Plus they also had Crime and Punishment on the same 3 for 2 sale, which is by... So I now have 3 books. I've only got 2 in front of me, but I have 3 books in this beautiful Russian classics set. Can I tell you what they're about right now? Not particularly. Last but not least, in my March haul, we have Building and Dwelling Ethics for a City by Richard Sennett. This is just another one of those books. I have not read this one yet either, but I've had my eye on it for quite a while at Readings, my local bookstore, and I'm just really interested what Richard Sennett has to say because I love exploring issues in cities. I'm really interested in ethics for cities. Like, what does that mean? Why is that the tagline of Building and Dwelling? How does it relate specifically to building and dwelling if it's ethics for a city? Everything about this book just really interested me, so I picked it up again on a gift card at Readings. So this is my last book for March. That was 29 books and I'm now sitting in a sea of books on my couch. Before I go, so I hauled 29 books, but I also unhauled 3 books. And one of them I still have, and that's Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline. I really, really enjoyed Ready Player 1, but this was very disappointing. It wasn't as bad as what people were saying it was. Like, my sister read this book and she thought it was horrible as well. So my expectations weren't very high, but I still wanted to read it. But it just took a different turn. It didn't have the same, I don't know, flavor as the first one. Like, I devoured the first one, but the main character takes a really drastic turn in his personality from the start of the book. So it's like you're reading from a different point of view, even though it's the same person. And it just wasn't as fun. It felt really forced as a sequel to Ready Player One. You can tell it was a standalone book and it worked really alone as a standalone book. So I'm keeping that one. I don't need to keep this one. I see it on my shelf and it just annoys me. So I'm letting this one go. The other 2 books that I unhauled, I have already unhauled, and those are Chalkman by C.J. Tudor, which I mentioned in my previous video, and then I also unhauled Rivers of London by Ben Aronovich. I hope that's his name because I don't have it in front of me. I've had that book on my shelf for a while and I really needed to give it a go because I just knew I was never going to get around to it. So I got the audiobook out from my library and I read the first few chapters as an audiobook just to see if it was something I could enjoy, and I did not care. I, for some reason, really don't enjoy the point of view from police or detective, and I didn't know that the main character, despite it being an urban fantasy, he was a copper. Like, I don't even like thriller mysteries from a copper's point of view. Plus his voice, I think it was aimed a lot at probably middle-aged men, that series, which is fine. You need books aimed at middle-aged men, but I'm not a middle-aged man. I did not care for the main character. I did not care for the side characters that I was introduced to in the first few chapters, and I didn't care enough to stick around to find out what was happening and the unexplainable things that were happening from the start of the book. So I let that one go and freed up my shelf for more books and freed up my time to finish other books that I would rather finish. So that's it. That's my quarterly haul and unhaul. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I showed you some books that you love and some books that you might love. But thank you for sticking around, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.